Welcome to SIDEBAR, where we talk to local and national organizations that provide victim advocacy, services, and support to victims of crime and to the community members in need. Today we speak to Sandy Moody from CASA, the court-appointed special advocates, about the work that they do for the children involved in family court cases.
Can you go ahead and introduce yourself? Give us your name and your title here.
Hi, my name is Sandy Moody, and I'm the Community Outreach Coordinator here at CASA of El Paso, the court-appointed special advocates.
And tell us a little bit, an overview about what CASA does.
So what CASA does is they advocate for the needs of children that are in the foster care system here in the county. So we train volunteers from the community. Folks that are at least 21 years of age can pass an extensive background check, attend our 35-hour training class, and folks that can commit to us for at least 12 to 18 months, the duration of a court case through Child Protective Services. And so our volunteers go out to the community. They do their own research for that child, meet with that child, meet with the family, meet with the doctors, the attorneys, everybody that's involved in that child's life, and they write a report to the judge based on what they feel is in the best interest of the children.
Now, you mentioned earlier, how many kids right now do you guys have in your care?
So on any given day in El Paso County, it can range from about 350 kids, give or take. It just depends on if children are returned to mom and dad. Some of them are, and which is what we want. Some of those kids are placed up for adoption, which is a little more challenging for the children, of course. And then, of course, we have kids that are coming into care. So that number is kind of fluid on any given day. So around 350 per day. That's a lot of kids just in this community. Mm-hmm.
What are some of the types of cases that you guys see most often as far as your foster kids?
So our children right now, the things that we're seeing is more issues, of course, with the parents. And it's going to be a lot of drug and alcohol issues, a lot of mental health issues, mental illness, things that have been left untreated. We do have cases of physical and sexual abuse. However, those aren't as predominant in our county as drugs and alcohol and mental illness.
So you guys basically advocate for the children, and then there's somebody else on the other end that would help with the parents to get them to a point where they could be reunited as a family unit. Is that ideally?
So, ideally, yes. Child Protective Services, once they take in a case and they have a family that has their children removed, they come up with a case plan with the family. And they do that with the whole family unit. So everybody that's involved with that family, they'll come up with a case plan. So whatever the issue is that the child was removed, say it was drugs and alcohol. Maybe, part of their case plan would be drug and alcohol therapy, rehab, maybe actual therapy, counseling therapy, talk therapy, something like that. Maybe the other piece of it is passing a certain amount of drug tests, things like that. So that would be where Child Protective Services would try to help them out to get those services and get everything that they need to get done. The attorneys can encourage that as well. And one of the things I really like about CASA is that we can encourage those things for those parents as well. Because what we want to do is, just like CPS, is return those kids to mom and dad. Well, we're advocating for our children. And a lot of times, this is what I believe, is that parents love their kids. A lot of times they're upset. They have a lot of things going on. They don't know how to handle it all. So, they're taking it out on the kids, unfortunately. But you can have that one person that's positive in their life when the parent's like, I really want to be with my kid. Our CASA volunteer can turn around and say, we want you to be with your kid. We want to advocate for you to have more visitation with them. We want that. But you've got to do these couple of things first, and then we can go in and ask for that. So it's kind of an all-of-around thing for our volunteers. They get to touch on a lot of people in those children's lives.
And what kind of role do you guys play with the court system and the judges? Are there things that they request from you guys?
So the only thing that they request from us is that we visit the child at least one time per month, more if possible, and a court report based on those visitations and interactions with the children and the parents. So we write that report, our volunteers write that report and send that over to the judge so that he or she can read that before they actually go into court. And they actually may want to ask extra questions. So our volunteers are there in court, so sometimes they get called into court as well. So that can be a little bit tricky, but we train you how to handle all of that during our training process here at CASA.
What's the difference for people who aren't really aware between, say, CPS and CASA? Because obviously they're similar, but not.
Not quite the same. Child Protective Services, they are in there to keep the family safe when they get a report of suspected child abuse. So they'll go in, do an investigation, and their findings will show that there is child abuse going on in the home. The child will be removed. And that's where we come in. And then we'll be appointed a case. CPS will send us the information. They'll say, hey, do you have a volunteer that can help us with this case? We've got 3 kids, 3 separate foster homes. They need a CASA on the case. The judge is looking for a CASA. Can you help us out?
So you mentioned, so you're having family units that are potentially split up, but your CASA would take the family as a whole, all 3 kids, and write the report on all 3 of them? Is that sometimes what would happen?
Yes, the CASA volunteer would be responsible for all the children involved in that family. Those children would remain in their foster homes, but that volunteer would see them in their different foster environments, and sometimes together, so that they could write a report for those 3 children and give that to the judge.
Now, your organization is almost 100% run on volunteers, correct?
Yes. We have 72 volunteers, give or take a few here and there today. And so that's, 172. I misspoke there. 172 volunteers and 12 staff members. So the 12 of us are paid, not a lot, enough. But most of the majority of the work, the casework is done by volunteers. Folks who take time out of their days, their busy life schedules, they work full time. Some of them have families of their own. Some of them are retired, so we really are grateful that we have that many.
So what are the demographics of your volunteers? Are you seeing a lot of people with maybe education, like teachers' background or social workers, or is it really...
It's really across the board. We do have we've seen a lot of influx of retired teachers because sometimes they spend all those years in the classroom and they're just not quite ready. And so this is just enough to keep our retired folks involved, which is perfect for them. We've got kids that are in college over at UTEP, maybe they're at EPCC, looking to get some experience, wondering if they need to, work with kids, or maybe they want to work with the elderly, whatever. So we have folks like that. Folks, when I came in as a volunteer, folks like me, work full-time, married, have a dog or a cat and need to give a little bit back to the community. So that's really what it is. But one of the things that I want to talk about with demographics is that we have a majority of our volunteers are female. And we are always looking for good, strong male volunteers, folks that are over 21 that have maybe a connection to the community, working or in school or something like that are willing to give back so that we can show these kids that we do have positive male role models, and that it's not always falling on the females because we're nurturers by nature. It just is what it is. So that's one of the things we're really working on right now.
So you're targeting the guys. Guys, come on in.
We are targeting men. Actually, this is my new flyer. We are targeting men. And one of the things that our men can do, exactly the same thing that women do, is just be a role model for these kids. Be a positive influence on these kids. You're going to visit them once, maybe twice a month, and show them that there are positive ways to be involved as a male. And then, in your talks with them, either male or female, and you won't tell them everything about your life, but something will come up and you'll be like, oh, when I went to college, and maybe you planted that seed in that kid's head. Maybe they're 7 years old and no one's ever mentioned the word, or, all they've known is abuse and neglect their whole life, and they don't know that positive role models can come in both male and female forms, or whatever people believe in or whatever. So it's kind of one of our targets right now.
How successful has this campaign been so far? Have you seen the numbers of male volunteers grow?
So it's just started, literally hot off the presses. I just pulled this out of the box yesterday.
Wow.
So maybe with your help, we can get that firestorm started. Part of one of our goals is to actually go to where the men are. We've got... Kind of sounds weird, but we've got a little connection with some of the local breweries here in town and doing a little something with that, maybe on a Saturday, just a 1 hour kind of spiel. Hey, come out, learn about CASA, see what you can do, give back. Oh, and here's a beer, kind of be where they're at. So that's kind of our thing. And also involving the 10 to 15 volunteers that we do have that are male to sort of reach out to their sphere of influence as well. So anybody that they know that they feel would be a great role model and could be a great volunteer would be wonderful. They do have to pass the background check and do all of that preliminary stuff as well. However, that's really in place to keep our kids safe again.
Just the same process you would with a female.
With anybody else, absolutely.
If I could suggest the bicycle shops here locally and the hiking places, Lost Dog Trailhead and stuff like that. Because I know a lot of people that do that type of stuff, the recreational stuff, and a lot of them do a ton of volunteer work.
They do.
And a lot of them are educated professionals.
Yeah, because they're not out at bars. They're like, I'm doing stuff on
Doing
Saturday.
stuff on the side on Saturday.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's actually a great idea. And so that's something that I will be looking into. Thank you for the tip. So that's one of the things that we're doing. And if anybody listening to the podcast is interested in becoming a CASA volunteer, they can check out our website at www.casaofelpaso.org. And we've got some interesting videos on there and our volunteer applications on there as well. And also some of the things that we require to be a volunteer as well is on there too. So if anybody wants to check that out, that would be great.
Do you do volunteer trainings like in cycles? Like in other words, like you fill up a class and then you take them? Is that how it typically works?
So we typically set a schedule because we have speakers come into our volunteer classes. We have folks that come in from Crime Victims Compensation, people from CPS, other agencies in the community to come and talk. So we try to set those speakers up first, and then we try to fill the classes up from there. We do have a class that does start in the middle of October and then one towards the end of October. A max on a class for us is about 8 to 10, mostly because of the training area that we have. You can fit 12 in there, but it's a little tight, but also for the dynamics with the training folks. So our volunteers are in there. They're actually face-to-face training. They're doing great collaboration. They're talking with our trainer, things like that. And so too many volunteers in that one room gets a little claustrophobic. So if we find that we need more training, we absolutely open it up and we pick a couple more training dates and invite people to come to training. And in order to get to training, you have to make that application, do a pre-screening interview, and start the background checks with the reference piece of it as well before we invite you. Because, we already know it's not going to quite work out. If you're not going to be a good fit, we want to kind of mitigate that before we even get you in the classroom. Maybe there's something that has come up in your personal life that you're like, nope, this isn't going to work for me. Or during the course of a conversation, you're like, you know what? I don't think this is for me as a person. Maybe I need to go and, volunteer with the Animal Rescue League or maybe Child Crisis Center or something like that. And so, which is great. The community needs you no matter what. If it's not here, we need you at other places too. So
right.
YMCA, maybe Boys and Girls Club, things like that. So, so sometimes we want to mitigate that from the get-go. Plus, if there's an issue on a background, maybe a background blemish, and I can't really go into too much detail on that, but if there is a background blemish, we want to mitigate that from the get-go as well. As I mentioned before, we want to do everything that we can not to re-abuse and neglect our children. So we try to get that up front.
Now, since people might be listening to this a year from now or a couple years from now, usually the training classes that you offer will be posted on your website, right?
Yes, they are posted there. And also you can email me directly through the website, and I can get you the absolute hot off the presses dates and everything for that. So if you're listening now or in a year, and you're not quite sure, you're thinking about it, we need you now, but we'll need you in a year too, and we'll need you in 2 years. And so whenever your schedule is and whatever you hear the calling for that, then we'll definitely entertain the ideas at that time.
How long have you guys been operating in El Paso?
So we've been here 33, I think this is our 33rd year. It's crazy. 33. We started, I think, in the basement of the courthouse with 2 employees, and they moved us to the 3rd floor. This was quite a while back, and we had 8 employees in that 3rd floor room. And then we got too big and had to put 2 employees in corners on the 11th floor of the courthouse. And then we ended up here at our current location in the Wells Fargo building in downtown El Paso. And so it's been great. Now we have places to have meetings. We can train here. We can have closed door conversations, regarding our cases where we don't have to worry about confidentiality because we're in a room already with the door closed. So we can honor that for our cases and our clients as well. So we love it here.
Can you explain some of the milestones that you've had since it started here in El Paso? So what are some of the key points throughout the years?
So initially we wanted to provide a CASA volunteer to every single child that was in foster care. We have really grown leaps and bounds over the last few years, and so we are almost at 100% service for kids. Now that changes again on any given day, and if we have volunteers available for that. So that's been pretty incredible. We've seen a rise in volunteers in the last, and I have numbers off the top of my head for the last year. So the last fiscal year that ended September of 2016 fell into September of 2017. We added 64 new volunteers. The last fiscal year that we just closed last month, we had 104 new volunteers.
Wow.
Yeah. I don't know what happened. It went crazy.
Just keep doing that.
So
a lot of community outreach.
A lot of community outreach. Yeah. I did, and I happen to have these numbers sort of off the top of my head for grants and things like that. Over almost 200 outreach events, just in conversation, table setup, somebody willing to let me come to their event and talk for 3 minutes or 3 hours, whatever. I'm available for that. I'll do that on Saturday at 6 a.m. if you need me. I've done it.
Now you can put this one on your grant list.
Yes, so this one as well. Anything that reaches out to the community. I do sometimes work with the clergy in town, so I go to churches on Sunday, and I will sit through a church service, and I'll be the guest speaker there, which is a little bit crazy. But we really want to bring back the whole church thing, because back in the day, it wasn't foster families that handled kiddos. It was the churches that did it, and we already know that church folk are good people. They already know what they want to give, and maybe they can give either, if it's not a volunteer couple of hours for us, maybe they want to be foster parents, or maybe they just want to donate a crib or something that they may have hanging out in their house for a family in need. So that's actually been pretty cool as well. We've worked with Child Protective Services on that, and with our judges here in town, going to church on Sunday. Hey, why not?
Can you go a little bit into the training that people can expect when they volunteer, like the different types of modules or the curriculum itself?
Sure. So our training is approximately 35 hours, give or take. We do a portion of it that's online. About 10 hours is online. And that's really just to kind of get you kind of a little bit of knowledge about what you're kind of walking into. Hopefully our volunteers have finished or started that training before they've even walked into our classroom. That way they can arm themselves with questions, anything that they heard or saw in those online webinars that they were like, you know what, I really want to ask more about that, or, you know, I have something to say about that. And then we bring them into our classroom setting. Our classroom is approximately 4 days. It's not 4 full days. We know that our volunteers get stressed out. It's hard to hear some of the stories. Right. Our trainer's the same way. It's hard for her to hear the stories. And so we have it for about 3 to 4 hours, 4 times. And then that final day, that 4th day, is going to be a full 8-hour kind of deal. But that's when we go into the courtroom. Before that, we prep you on how to dress, with your sport coat or your dress or whatever, no jeans, shorts, flip-flops, things like that. So when you go into court, you already know what to expect. So you'll meet the judges, you'll meet the attorneys, you're going to meet some folks with Child Protective Services, other volunteers, through those modules that we do that training in our classroom as well. So we do a lot of video training, verbal training, of course, because we know that everybody learns at different ways in different mediums. And so you have to connect as best as you can to everybody.
Right. Now, this type of volunteer work could be emotionally taxing on a person. Do you guys offer any self-help for the volunteers, either internally or outsource that to like anything that can help them if they're having a certain stressful case?
Sure. So we have volunteer supervisors that help with all of that. Our volunteer supervisors can supervise up to 30 volunteers, and they use that time when they speak to the volunteer to sort of decompress. We call it staffing, right. Where they can decompress. Listen, I just heard this and this and this in the courtroom. I can't right now. So we kind of train them to do, meditation, anything that would help them outside of these walls, within what we hear with CASA. Take some time out for yourself. If this is a particularly stressful case, if we need to add another CASA on there to help you out with some of the workload, we can do that. I mean, we have kids that are in families. We got 8 kids in a family. That's a lot for one CASA. Maybe a CASA that's working. Why don't we add somebody else on there? Maybe they're hearing something else that the other CASA isn't. One of the things I always recommend to our volunteers is that, they take time out for themselves. They communicate with us when things are getting a little bit too sticky, maybe too hard. And when they do come to the end of that case, maybe take a couple of months break. We need you. Yes, we need you, but we need you to be available in the best person that you can be. And if you're still sort of processing what's happened maybe in court or something like that, or be it with your personal life, we want you to be the best that you can be. And so we don't want to stress you out for anything else like that. So volunteers do take time off.
So a lot of the work here is based on teamwork. Mm-hmm. Everybody's helping each other.
Everybody's collaborating. Yes. So our volunteers are never alone. Kind of sounds weird. But our volunteer supervisors are not more than a phone call or a text message away or an email. Anybody that's involved with this child, our volunteers can reach out and get more information or collaborate with them based on what they feel is in the best interest. But I don't do any casework. I haven't in quite some time, but I do communicate with the staff on text message if something comes up for training or a new volunteer or something like that. It's tough. We're kind of on all the time. You know how it is.
So you mentioned that you haven't been doing casework in a while, but you were telling me earlier that that's actually how you came to work here at CASA, was that you started as a volunteer. Can you tell us a little bit about your personal experience and how you started here?
Yes, I started here about 8 years ago as a volunteer. I was a military spouse, and my husband at the time was getting ready to deploy, and my boss at the time asked me what I was going to do while he was gone, because it was just myself and the cat. And so he came into my office. He said, "What are you going to do?" And I said, "I'm going to watch Law & Order reruns and stay home." And he didn't like that. He didn't think that was good enough. So he directed me down here, and that's how I ended up here being a CASA. So my boss at work was a CASA, and he had enough time, and he was an active duty soldier in a pretty high-ranking position. And so if he could do it, I surely had time to do it with everything that was going on with training and soldiers and all of that, and I didn't have any of that to worry about. So I came down here and I got involved. I took the training. It was a little bit different. When I first came into training, we didn't have any online modules, so it was all in person, and it was a Friday all day Saturday, all day Sunday, an evening on Monday, and a portion on Tuesday. So it was pretty heavy hitting. And I sat in training thinking that this was not for me. I was listening to stories, cases, local cases. The cases that we talk about in training, most of them are local, believe it or not. We have one that isn't local, but we do have most of them that are local. Actual people here in town, these cases came to us. So it was very hard to hear, very heavy on the heart. But I ended up with a case with 3 kids. Incidentally, they were a military family as well, and their reasoning for being involved with Child Protective Services was lack of supervision, which is another one of our hot button issues right now. How can you leave your kids, how long can you leave your kids home alone? Who can babysit them? And what time of day can it be? My oldest kid, they become your kids when you become a volunteer. They're yours. At the time, I didn't have any kids of my own, so I think that's important to note. So my oldest kid, she was 12. She was left at home alone with the younger kids. The next one down was 10, and the baby, he was 8. He wasn't a baby, but he was 8. And it was 2:30 in the morning, and she hadn't seen mom and dad in a few hours. And you can use your imagination as to where they were. She calls 911, and so it snowballed from there. Come to find out they had other issues going on, financial issues, not enough food in the house, things like that, basic life things. Case went on for 13 months, and I visited with those kids every month. I used to leave my office early. I would communicate with my supervisor. I'd leave my office early and go do the rounds. 1 kid at each foster home, because at the time we couldn't get them all into one foster home.
That's tough.
So it was tough. So I would get in the car and then I would see them, all 3 of them together. I would meet them. They had court-mandated family therapy, and I would meet them at the therapist's office before they went into therapy. So I would get to see mom and dad, the foster parents bringing in the children, and then the children to see how they would all interact with mom and dad. And so I will never forget that. Mom used to bring in, very positive story, Mom used to bring in a meal for each kid every single time that I was there. And so the kids would be so excited. What did Mom bring us this time? And she would hand them each a bag with their dinner in it. And so that's one of the stories that you really want to hear happen. I recommended those kiddos go home to mom and dad with return and monitor, and they did. 13 months they were returned to mom and dad. And so it was a long case. A year is a long time in a kid's life. A year is a long time in our lives. But, we really want to find permanency as quickly as possible. And we haven't heard from mom and dad since then, which is great, especially now because I work here. If they were to call, I would know because I do work here. There's also another tidbit to my story. I'm also a foster adoptive mom, and that's where more to my story turns out. I adopted a little boy from foster care, not from Texas. I wasn't living here at the time, who was born addicted to methamphetamines. And so he's 4 now, and he's crazy just like every other 4-year-old. But if I hadn't done CASA, I might not have been prepared to do foster care through CPS because that was very challenging. Right. And then it all is full circle, and here I am 3 years later. 3 years later, back in El Paso, talking about my kids from my case a couple times a week, and then thinking about my son, and it's all full circle, I feel like.
You mentioned your first family was a military family. Do you have a high percentage here? I mean, obviously, we have a large population here of military, so it would stand to reason that there would be a percentage. Is there a large population of families that you get that are military?
So we do. So our percentage is below 10%. The military tends to handle their things internally, unless it's off post, and then that's when law enforcement gets involved. However, on the flip side, we do have a lot of military folks that volunteer with us. So we have about 35 folks that are involved in the military in some way, be it active duty, retired, maybe a spouse, maybe just a family member that's with them that gives back their time. And so that's really important to note, military.
I think that it's probably advantageous for you guys to have those military people, perhaps to deal with the military cases, because they are such unique cases to any other family. They present different challenges.
Yes. Just knowing even rank structure
Right.
and who to talk to and where to go on post is half the battle. We do a lot of the same things, but just trying to figure out how to navigate all of that structure, it's really important to have folks there. And as a former military spouse, I happen to know that us military spouses, we can pretty much do whatever's thrown at us. And so when I get a military spouse that comes in here and that's like, I'm going to be here for 18 months, I'm not going to get a job, I'm going to do this, I already know that I can hand that person a pretty challenging case and know that they can handle it, with all the skills that the military has taught us to handle. So we're always looking for qualified volunteers, even if the volunteer from the military can't give us that 12 to 18 months, because the reality of it is that Uncle Sam owns their family and that they could get orders at any given time.
Yeah.
We just ask for communication on our end. Just let us know, hey, my soldier's going to get orders. I don't know when they're coming in. We can work with that. Our kids need those folks.
For those volunteers that get PCS'd or whatever happens, are there times that the training that they've completed here can transfer over if there's a local chapter or anything?
That's a really good question. So some of the local stuff that we do here does not transfer over. However, a lot of the basic training does. So when somebody says, hey, I'm going to be in El Paso for 18 months, but we're going to go to, let's say they end up in Arkansas somewhere. I don't know. I just pulled that out. I don't know. My recommendation for them is to reach out to that organization, take a copy of their certificates, any of the online training that they've done, the actual training that they did with us, so that the new place can review that and then decide what to do going forward. A lot of times it's local things that,
Right.
we want you to meet with the judge. We want you to come to the courthouse. We just want to go over some of the laws, some of the people.
Texas might be it's going to have different laws.
Yeah, it's going to have different
Arkansas
laws
or procedures.
And so, maybe they use a different online portal to put their notes in for case notes, things like that. So just things like that. So I encourage, if you've volunteered here, take your knowledge and volunteer it someplace else if you happen to get moved, or vice versa.
Right.
In the same vein of military volunteers, obviously looking here at your thing, I noticed that the other side is in Spanish. How much is your need right now for Spanish-speaking volunteers?
So we want, so I do have to say this, everything that happens in the courthouse with us and it goes on in English. So all of our court reports, everything that happens in the courtroom, all happens in English. We do have translators that are there that do speak in Spanish, so that's one thing. But we do know that we have a huge population here in El Paso where their native language is Spanish. A lot of our foster families, that's their native language. Maybe it's a biological family, maybe grandma, grandpa, that's their native language. So if you are bilingual, we would love to have you. We need you to translate those things for us, and meet with those families and really give them a piece of something that's theirs as well. When people are talking over them or talking in a different language, they don't know what's going on. They need to hear what's going on with those kids that are living with them. So it's really important. It's very helpful for us, honestly. So, yeah. So we take them, everybody.
You just need a bunch of diverse people.
We do, and we've got. I've got a woman that just came in as a new volunteer. She speaks Dutch. We've got somebody who speaks German. We could always use sign language people.
Wow.
You never know. You never know.
That's true.
You never know.
Yeah.
Might have parents that only speak ASL. Or
Maybe
kids.
you have a child that is in foster care that needs to communicate. Well, we need to help that kid out. We need to help that family out. So
Done. If you could just say your name and the title and how long you've been working here again, because I recorded the first part, but I wasn't monitoring, so just just so I know that I have it.
Okay. My name is Sandy Moody, and I'm from CASA, the Court-Appointed Special Advocates, and I'm the Community Outreach Coordinator here. And I've been working here almost 3 years, but been involved off and on for about 8. That's a long time. Think about that.
And can you walk the listeners through the website if they want to volunteer, if they want to donate, what they can find on the website?
Sure. You can reach me at www.casaofelpaso.org. My email address is on that website as well, but it's smoody, Moody, at casaofelpaso.org. And our phone number is 915-225-5214. And if you're interested in volunteering, you can dial extension 109. That's me directly. I'm in and out a lot, but leave me a message and I'll get right back with you as soon as I get back into the office. But again, thank you guys so much for coming in and giving us this great platform and opportunity. We really appreciate anything that we can do.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you for listening to this episode of Sidebar. Please visit CASA at casaofelpaso.org and like their Facebook page, Casa of El Paso. Thanks for listening.